1 Newtonian, 2 Newtonians, 3 Newtonians. I think this might be getting a little out of hand.
When it comes to telescopes, bigger is usually better, right? Well, let's find out. We're going to be putting the 14-inch against the 12.
Stood here next to me are two of Skywatcher's biggest telescopes. We have the 14-inch and the 12-inch Flextube Dobsonians. In this video, we're going to be comparing two of the giants against each other. We're going to be talking about the size, weight and specs, but also what you can see visually and capture with a camera. I just want to mention this video is in no way sponsored or endorsed by Skywatcher in any way. This telescope is mine and the 12-inch was lent to me by a friend. So let's address the elephant in the room, the weight and the size first.
So, spoiler alert, the 12 is a lot easier to move than the 14, however the tubes are roughly the same weight. I can carry out the 12-inch base by myself, the 14 though I need help, or to break it down into smaller pieces.
The 14 and 16-inch Dobsonian flex tubes, they have a conical mirror design. This allows the mirror to be lighter, but also benefits in terms of cooldown time, because the mirror is physically thinner. In the 12-inch and below models, the mirror has a flat base like you would typically find in most Newtonians. This is thicker than a conical mirror design, which means it will cool down a little bit slower. It also means it's heavier than a conical mirror design. So the tubes are roughly the same weight, however the same cannot be said about the bases. The 14-inch base is a lot heavier than the 12-inch. You can take the 14 and 16-inch bases apart into 4 separate pieces. This allows you to transport it potentially a lot easier in separate parts, but also allow you to fit it in a smaller vehicle. So if you plan to take it places and take it to dark sky areas, a 14-inch base may actually be easier to transport than a 12-inch. It purely depends on the size of vehicle you're using. If you want to transport this base by yourself, you're probably going to need to be 6'6" and built like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, of which I'm not. That means I can transport the 12-inch base by myself a lot easier in one go. I can still move the 14-inch, it just means I either need assistance or I need to take it apart into those 4 pieces I mentioned. The physical design of both these telescopes is really quite similar despite their size. They've both got manual clutches on the side for altitude and a manual clutch on the bottom for azimuth. They've both got Wi-Fi, hand controllers and all those things you would expect. The weight distribution on both of them is quite similar. I know a lot of Dobsonians like to be nose heavy, but both these telescopes are really quite back heavy, especially the 14-inch model. So adding heavy accessories shouldn't be too much of a problem for most people. It's not until you have them next to each other do you really see the difference in size. The 14-inch base is so much wider and so much bigger than the 12. The physical construction is also beefier too. On the 14-inch model, the wood is physically about 7 or 8 mil thicker compared to the 12. So all these things add up to the 14-inch base being a lot heavier than this guy. I just want to mention while I have them next to each other, the 12-inch model does have wheels attached to it. The owner wanted wheels to have it easier to move about, so it is a little bit higher off the ground than would be otherwise. So here I have them both pointed at the zenith. Just bear in mind, the 12-inch is about 2 inches higher off the ground than would be otherwise. So just take that into account, it should sit about here normally. So there is a decent difference in height. I'm about 5'10", so this should give you some perspective on how tall this telescope actually is. Even when it's at the zenith, I can still happily look straight through the eyepiece. It's at basically perfect eye level for someone my height. So if you're around 5'10", 5'11", maybe even 6 foot, you'll be able to comfortably look through the 14-inch telescope. The 16-inch is a lot taller in that respect, where most people will need a step to get to the eyepiece when it's at the zenith. This is a really good size for that reason, but if you're smaller, 5'2" to 5'4", once again, you're probably going to struggle to look through this eyepiece and will probably need a step. The 12-inch though, as you can visually see, is a lot lower. It's much easier to look through if you're shorter, but also it's just more comfortable for more people, especially if you want to share your telescope with others, especially friends or family. When it's at the zenith, it's actually quite a bit below my eye level, so I would actually have to bend down slightly. But this is truly perfect for most people. Really, it's easier to crouch than it is obviously to stand on a step. So this is really great, and also it's just so much more portable. Something to pay attention to is the 8 to 12-inch models only come with a single speed focuser, while the 14 and 16 come with a dual speed focuser. If this is something that's important to you, you might want to order a replacement focuser, or if you're really serious, just go to the 14 or 16-inch models. As I mentioned in my first video when I first got this telescope, this is a beast in every regard. The light collection is amazing, but the weight is really something that has to be considered. And here on its equatorial mount, I have the 8-inch Newtonian that I use for deep sky imaging, and this is here purely for a size comparison. An 8-inch tube is not small by any means. Next to those two beasts, this thing looks absolutely tiny. But I think any telescope apart from a 16 or larger would look tiny next to a 14-inch telescope. Regardless of what some people think, bigger is not always better. Cost aside, the size and storage do pose two big problems. The size isn't portable for a lot of people. If you're 5'2" or 5'4", you're going to really struggle to move and carry these, regardless of how strong you are. The physicalities of having to reach over to pick them up is quite tricky. So we've gone over the physical traits of these telescopes. I will list the specs on screen very briefly, but if you want to check them out, click the links below and look at all the juicy specs of these telescopes. So believe it or not, this is not the end. We're actually going to be comparing these to a 10-inch telescope as well. So if you're interested, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to not miss when that video drops. Anyway, enough talking, let's get to using these telescopes for a bit of visual and also for basic imaging.
Something that really surprised me about these Flextube telescopes was that the collimation actually holds really well. Even once you've collapsed the tube down and extended it again, the collimation is still pretty good. The laser dot was just outside of the donut, which made it a really simple adjustment.
Okay, so that's the 14-inch collimated. One more to go. Let's go and collimate the 12-inch. Okay, so I've just finished getting the 14 and the 12-inch Dobsonian aligned. The thing that surprised me was the 12 was actually slightly more accurate on the second GoTo for the star alignment. I guess that might be because the 12-inch I properly made sure was flat with a bubble level, whereas the 14 I haven't done that yet because it's a bit of a beast and I just wanted to get it going. I've got limited time with this 12-inch, so I want to make the most of it. Unfortunately, the sky conditions tonight aren't great. We've got a fair bit of high cloud and a very bright moon to contend with. However, I'll do my best to evaluate both these telescopes next to each other while I have the chance. We've got a lot of thunderstorms, rain and cloud forecasts for the next 7 to 10 days, and unfortunately, I don't have that much time. The 14-inch has around 40% extra light gathering than the 12. However, will the real world show that difference under these conditions? So let's get going, do some star tests, and maybe see if we can see a few deep sky targets, and then get on to Saturn. Okay, here is my first genuine look through this telescope. This is the true first light. First deep sky object, Messier 57. I've seen it through the 14-inch, now let's compare it to the 12. So with this 32mm eyepiece I'm using, obviously the Ring Nebula isn't very big. However, the focal length between the 12 and the 14 is quite similar, so focal length isn't really the difference we're looking for. It is the aperture, the light gathering ability of these telescopes. However, they're both big telescopes, so really it's going to be quite close. I'm going to swap this 32mm eyepiece out for a 12mm to get a closer look, and then I think we'll be able to see the differences between these two telescopes. So I'm going to put that in now and have a second look. Okay, so I'm just taking my first look close up. I'm actually using a 6mm eyepiece that has an amazing field of view of 66 degrees, so we get a nice close up but wide view. And yeah, the ring looks good. My eyes are still adjusting because I was just having a bright light on me, but I can see the structure of the ring. No central star, but that's very, very hard to see. So I've just had a look through this 6mm eyepiece and the Ring Nebula up close. With this single speed focuser, it is a little bit harder to focus. It's very, it feels tough, but in a good way, so it doesn't feel like it's going to slip. So once you do get it in focus, it's not going to move, which is nice. The views through here are interesting, but before I give my opinion, I'm going to view through the 14-inch and compare the views. So let's take this eyepiece out and go put it in the 14-inch. Okay, so I'm just viewing the Ring Nebula now through the 14-inch with the 6mm eyepiece. And first up, it's a little bit easier to focus due to the dual speed focuser. But visually, it is definitely brighter through the 14-inch. And I can make out a little bit more colour, but it's visually definitely a bit brighter. I'm just going to go back to the 12 without turning any lights on and then have another view. I'm looking really closely to see if I can make out the central star. The central star within M57. It's very hard to see. I'm using averted vision, but even my young eyes are struggling to see it even with a 14-inch aperture. The skies aren't very dark, so the contrast is quite low, but I can't make out M57 with the central star. But I'm going to take this back to the 12-inch and have a second look. So I've just gone back and forward a few times between the 12-inch and the 14-inch with the same eyepiece with no lights on to let my eyes adjust. And it seems the 14-inch, as you'd expect, is a little bit brighter. With averted vision, it's even a bit more noticeable. However, they both deliver fantastic views. And really the eyepiece height makes quite a big difference to that comfort of viewing. For some people, the 12 will be a lot easier to use because the eyepiece is about down here versus up here for the 14-inch. So that might be a big factor in deciding between these two big Dobsonians. So it's a week later and I'm just out with my 8-inch SCT on the EQ6R and the 14-inch, and I'm currently capturing Saturn once again. But I thought I'd just let everyone know that I've waited a week. We've had terrible weather. We've had loads of storms, loads and loads of rain. I do just want to say though, I did look at M57, the Ring Nebula, through the 14-inch telescope tonight, which is the 27th of September. I started this video almost 2 weeks ago, but tonight I did view M57, the Ring Nebula, under a moonless night. I used a 6mm eyepiece with the 2x Barlow to try and get as high magnification as I can with my setup in order to try and hopefully see the central star. I think I may have seen it. I'm not totally sure. The seeing conditions tonight aren't amazing, but I know you need very good seeing conditions to see it. So I'm not going to say for certain I've seen it. I may or may not have. I can't work out if I'm going crazy or not, but it's exciting. This is the start of my big visual journey, which I'm really excited about sharing with you all. But I just wanted to say, unfortunately, I haven't been able to make as many comparisons as I wanted to do. Weather in the UK makes astronomy really quite difficult sometimes. Unfortunately, we don't have weeks of clear skies, so I can't make all the comparisons under a dark moonlit night as I'd like to. I tried to do more tonight, but unfortunately we got multiple rain warnings, so I had to put the telescopes away, then bring them back out, then put them away. So I want to just apologise to everyone. This is not as in-depth as I wanted it to be, but trust me, I did try, and I always want to bring the best content I can. So thank you all so much for sticking with me. I really do appreciate it. Anyway, back to the video. So I've just done a visual comparison of the 14 against the 12-inch. As you'd expect, they're very similar, but the 14 does provide that little bit extra pop with a little bit more light gathering. I'm going to quickly attach the camera and grab some brief live stacks. I'm going to be using an IMX 585 sensor, which is brand new to me. I'm excited to use it. I heard it's great. and I've seen some really fantastic results online. So I'm going to attach the camera to both of them, do a live stack, and then we'll compare the images. I expect them to be very, very similar. However, proof will always be in the pudding. So I've just got SharpCap 4 open, I've got the 585 connected, and even in the live view at 5 frames a second, we can clearly see the ring nebula, which shows the sensitivity of this camera sensor and this telescope. We're currently connected to the 12-inch, and we're going to do a brief live stack at full resolution. I've manually focused, which is a little bit tricky with that focuser because it's only a single speed. So the settings we're going to be using to capture this will be 2.85 seconds at gain 500. So we're going to do a live stack and see how that comes out. Swap to the 14-inch, take hopefully the same exposures, and then compare the two and see how they come out. So I've just put the 585 into the 14-inch knob. We're going to capture 51 frames, the same as what we captured in the 12, and see how they compare. And hopefully we will see a slight difference that the 14-inch will be a little bit brighter. Focusing was obviously easier on this telescope because the dual speed focuser can allow for more precise focus. If you're not into imaging, the single speed is totally fine. So it looks like the 12 packs a lot of performance into its small package. It's a little bit smaller than the 14, but its light gathering is still incredible. Anyway, I'm going to carry on capture some photos with a 14-inch telescope, and I'll see you all in the morning. So last night was really great fun. Having access to two big Dobsonians is something of a rare treat. As you'd expect, for imaging, the results are very close. With modern day camera sensors being as sensitive as they are, the slightly bigger aperture really doesn't make that huge of a difference. For visual, that's where it comes into its own. The bigger the aperture, the brighter details you can see and the fainter objects you'll be able to actually find in the sky. But as I say, if you're just into live stacking with electronic assisted astronomy, then the 12-inch makes probably more sense. The big telescope is great, but not everyone wants to be moving it back and forward. The 12-inch is physically easier to carry by yourself. I can carry the 12-inch base back and forward quite happily. I do appreciate not everyone will be able to do that, but it is totally possible. I can set it up and pack it down in a matter of minutes, whereas the 14-inch takes a little bit longer. However, for me personally, I love that bit extra aperture, and for planetary, the larger aperture, the more resolution power you will have when the skies do eventually clear up. Just in case you happen to be buying one of these telescopes in the future, or maybe you're just as excited as I am, click the link below to buy one. They're affiliate codes and they help me out, they cost you nothing, but it helps support me to keep making these videos. And here are my final thoughts. The main thing is, just enjoy what you're doing. Don't let someone tell you there is a better telescope you should have bought with that money. That's often not the case. What you want to buy is what you want to buy. Bigger is not always better. And sometimes, hey, we just like having equipment, and that's totally fine. You don't need to justify what you've bought to anybody. My personal feelings is the majority of time I value portability over aperture. However, on those good nights, I want the most aperture I can carry. The 12-inch I feel like is the perfect fit for most people. If you've got a semi-permanent setup, the 14 or maybe even the 16 will be the best option for you. But as I say, who really cares? Even if you have a roller-proof observatory, you might just want to have an 8 or a 10-inch Dobsonian just for some fun, and that's totally fine. And thank you all so much for coming along and joining me on my journey as I explore space visually and capture photos of the night sky. So remember, it's not about what you use, it's as long as you enjoy using it. Anyway, until next time, just remember, my name's Ben, you've been watching Vibro Astro, and remember to keep looking up.